Hi, my name is McKenna Blanthorne. Today we're going to be making some gift boxes with assorted colors of cardstock. Go ahead and grab your supplies and let's get crafting along. Alright everybody, so I just opened Silhouette Studio on my computer. This is what it looks like when you open it up, and over here I'm just going to come click this page in my top right hand corner, and this is the page setup. So I'm just going to click that. Today I'm using the Cameo 4 machine, so I'm using the default settings for Silhouette Studio, but if you are using a different machine like the Portrait or the Cameo Pro, you're going to need to adjust this section of Silhouette Studio up here. So there it is numbered right here for us, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can just select the machine that we're using first, then you'll select the feed type. Unless you're using the new Auto Sheet Feeder accessory, you're just going to leave that at manual. And then you're going to select your cutting mat. Like I said, I'm using the default, which is the Cameo, but if you're using the Portrait mat, you can select that from the drop-down menu. And then you'll also change your media size if you're using smaller media. I'm using 12 by 12 cardstock for this project, so I don't need to change my media size. And the rest of this we don't have to worry about right now. They're just customizations that you can make to Silhouette Studio. Now that we have our page setup completed, we can go ahead and open our designs to put them into our Silhouette Studio document. So we are going to grab these designs from our library, which you can find up in the right-hand corner. So I'm just going to click on this blue tab, and then you'll see all of your designs loaded. These are the designs that come with your machine. So we can just go ahead and find the designs that we're looking for and double click them to open them in Silhouette Studio. So the first thing that I want to open is this Jungle Party box right here. This is the base for this project. So I'm just going to go ahead and double click the box and it will open, and then it opened up in my document. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag these boxes to the side. So then I'm going to re-enter my library. And we are going to use one animal for this project, and I would like to use the giraffe. You could use the elephant, the lion, or the tiger, but I'm just going to use the giraffe. So I'm going to open up this file, and then I'm going to delete the tiger the same way, just clicking it and then pressing the delete key on my keyboard. And I'm just going to drag it over here for right now. We're going to resize it because obviously it's too big for this project right now. And then I'm going to go back into my library. I'm going to grab a dark green leaf, so I'm going to double click that file. Let's go ahead and do this leaf. So I'm going to delete the rest of them. Then drag this piece over. I would also like to do a light green leaf, so I'm going to grab this one. Let's do this one, could look nice with the set. And then I also lastly want to add a flower. And I just want to point out that this project is pre-thought out. I'm not just being able to just look at these designs and just grab it out of my head. I know what designs I'm using because these are the Jungle Party designs. So don't feel bad if you can't go as fast as this. Just make sure that you grab the designs that you want, and really you can customize this any way that you want. I'm going to go ahead and use the orange flower, so I'm going to delete my other two. And then I'm just going to drag this over here, and I just wanted to point out of these free designs, I mean, you could do a basketball for a basketball sports party. You could do a donut for a fun little gift box, put a donut inside. So there's so many things you can do with these free designs that we give you with your machine. So really make sure that you try this project out because there's a lot of different options. You could do an apple and give it to a teacher. So there's just so many fun things that we can do. So now that we have all of our designs, I'm going to go back into the design tab just by clicking on the design tab in the upper right hand corner. And now we need to resize our pieces to fit on the box. So I'm going to hold down my space bar, and that makes it so I can pull my mouse over, pull my screen over so that I can see all of these design pieces. So the first thing that I'm going to resize is my giraffe. And the way that we look at this box, this is the side of the box. This is the bottom of the box, And then this is like the front side that we're going to be designing on. So this is kind of our design space that we're going to be using. It can overlap a tiny bit up here. This isn't going to be laying flush against the design, but since I'm using the giraffe, it is going to overlap that part. So to resize a design, you simply just click the design and then use the corner squares to pull it and resize it, and this will keep it at the same aspect ratio. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of center it a little bit. The giraffe is obviously the tallest and widest design of the set, so if you want to use the tiger instead, it might fill it up a little bit easier. But we have a lot of different designs that we can fill up the space with also. So then I think it would be really, really fun to put my flower over here, like on the giraffe's back. And then I'm going to use my green leaves to go in the lower corner. So I'm going to resize this, and then I'm going to rotate it by using this little green circle up here. When I hover over the top of that, I can rotate my leaf. And I really like to let my designs overlap, as you guys can see. And one thing that I also wanted to point out, right now, this is the way that I want my designs to show up, like the order and everything. But if I wanted like the flower to be behind the giraffe or something like that, or sorry, I wouldn't put the flower behind the giraffe. If I wanted this green leaf to be on top of the flower, I just come up here to these little buttons up here, and I can click bring to front, and as you can see, that brings my leaf to the front of the flower. But I want the flower in front, so I'm just going to put that up there. And then I lastly want to show you how to duplicate the flower, so we can put another flower down here. So to duplicate, you simply just select the item you want to duplicate, click on it, and then you're going to right click and select copy. And then you're going to right click and select paste, and we have another flower that we can use. And I'm going to make this one a little bit bigger. Awesome. Well, I think this design is super fun. This green leaf's a little big, so I'm going to make that one a little bit smaller. We do want the highlight of the box to be the animal, so I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller actually. Okay, so this is all we have to do to set up our design, the actual design. So now we kind of have a fun little digital preview of what our box is going to look like. So now we can set this up to cut. And what we need to do to set it up to cut is we just need to group everything by colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to first drag the box to the side, because that's going to be cut on craft paper. And then the giraffe is the only black piece, so I'm going to just drag this over here. We only have one light green leaf in this project, and we only have one dark green leaf in this project, so I'm just going to separate everything out. But then for our flowers, we have a couple different colors. So I'm just going to click one flower to select it, and then I'm going to hold down Shift to select my other flower at the same time. And I'm simply going to right click and then select Ungroup. And this will separate out my little yellow pieces from the red pieces and the orange pieces, so we can cut all of these on our different colors of paper. So now that we have this completed, we're ready to begin cutting. So I'm going to cut my box first. I like to start out with my biggest pieces and then cut my littlest pieces at the end, just because if you cut the littlest pieces first, it can be a little bit hard to keep track of them while you're cutting everything else, and sometimes they fall on the ground and things like that. So we're going to cut our craft piece of paper first. So I'm just going to drag this over to my artboard, and then I'm just going to hold down my space bar and move back over to see the entire mat again, you can see this little red line around your mat, and that is the cut border. So you can get really, really close to the cut border. Obviously, you don't want to overlap the cut border because that is the limitations of the space that the blade can enter. So just make sure that you're inside that red line, and then we're going to go to the send panel. And here in the send panel, you'll see that if your cut is set up correctly, it will show up with a red outline around the outside. If it's showing up like this, it's set to a no cut. So right now, if you sent your machine to cut, nothing would cut. So if that's occurring and it's just a default that the artist has set the design to or something like that, you just need to click the design and then just select this cut right here, and everything will cut for you. So the other thing that we need to do is select the material we're using. Last time we used this machine, we were cutting matte vinyl. So I'm just going to select that drop-down menu, and all of these materials will pop up, and I can just type cardstock. And then I select the textured heavy because craft paper is a little bit thicker paper, and most cardstock that you purchase at a craft store is 80 pounds. So that's what I select, and then it's automatically reading my auto blade, so I don't need to change the other parts. Or it's actually not reading the auto blade yet because we need to insert the auto blade and then load our media. So let's go ahead and do that. After you've opened up your machine and taken it out of the box, you can use the power cords that come with the machine to connect it to a power source, and then simply press this power button on the right-hand side to turn it on. So it will have some little lights show up on the side, and then once the machine name pops up across the top, that means that it's ready to begin cutting. To open the machine, I'm just going to tug this little cover very, very lightly and then push it back. And we need to insert our blade now. This is the auto blade that comes with the machine. It has auto detection that you can select the material that you're cutting in Silhouette Studio, and it knows what settings to cut your material with, so you don't have to automatically adjust the blade depth. And it has this little bar on the back, and that's how that works. It has a number 1 on the front, meaning that it goes in the first carriage. So in order to insert the auto blade, you will just tug out this little tab right here, the number 1 tab, and then push the blade down. Hold the blade down while you pull up slightly and then push inward. It kind of does like a double click, and that's how you know that the blade is securely in place. Now we're going to set up our mat. So when you receive your machine, it will come with a mat that has this blue cover on top. This is just a dust cover to keep your mat from getting dirty and to help it stay sticky for longer. So I just moved the blue cover off, and I will keep that blue cover mat storage after I'm done with this project. So I took my craft paper, and now I'm just going to line it up with the sticky part of my mat. And I like to press it down a little bit with my fingers just to smooth it out. And at this point, we are ready to load our material into the machine. To load the material, we are going to press this upward arrow, and then we're going to line up this edge of our mat with this gray line and arrow. And this is how you know where to put it so that the machine will pull in evenly and it will cut in the correct place. So I'm going to press that upward arrow. It will start blinking, and that means that it's ready to be loaded. So I'm just going to line up that edge of the mat with the gray line and then hold it. And you just wait a couple seconds, and then it automatically pulls the material and the mat into the machine. And this allows you to use both hands to feed the material so that you get a nice even feed. At this point, we're ready to hop back into Silhouette Studio to press send and then begin cutting our material. Now that we've set up our machine, all we have to do is come down here and press send. You can see that the Cameo 4 said it's ready to go. If your machine is not showing up as ready right here, you can click this little machine icon down here to select the machine from the drop-down list. But most of the time when you plug in your machine, it will say ready right here. I'm going to leave all of my settings the same. For this project, craft paper is a little bit thicker, so I may need to adjust my settings after this first cut if it doesn't cut through all the way, but let's just see how it cuts. So I'm just going to come down here and click send. The machine just finished cutting, so what I like to do anytime my machine finishes cutting a material is before I unload the material on the mat, I always like to make sure that it cuts. So to do that, I'm just going to come down here to the corner where I can see the cut line, and then I'm just going to try to peel it. And it actually looks like it cut really, really nicely. Like I said, craft paper is a little bit thicker, so if your craft paper or the paper you're using hasn't cut through, simply go back to Silhouette Studio and then click send again, and it will just cut in the exact same place. But that's why I like to do this before I unload my mat, because if I unload my mat and then reload it, it might not cut in the exact same place. But if you haven't moved your mat, if you haven't touched your machine and just checked to make sure that it's cut, and you press send, your cut will be exactly on top of the cut that you just made. So just make sure to always check everything. I check everything, whether that's heat transfer, vinyl, cardstock, just because that way I waste less material. So since our machine cut great, we're going to go ahead and press this little downward arrow to unload the material. And then I'm going to pull off my excess. And you can kind of see, I checked this corner, but this corner actually kind of stuck a little bit. It's still cut all the way through. It's just the nature of the craft paper. So just make sure that when you're taking it off, you go really, really slowly. Perfect. So I'm just going to go ahead and now flip over my mat, and the reason that I flip over the mat is so that my pieces don't curl when I take them off, since it is rather sticky. And you can see these inside pieces too. Sometimes these will stick to your mat. These ones came out with the big design, but I'm just going to pull those out and then just place this big piece to the side. Like I said, I like to cut from biggest pieces to smallest pieces so that I don't lose the pieces while I'm cutting. Now we're just going to repeat the craft paper step to cut the other side of our box. So I'm just going to load my second piece of craft paper onto the mat, and then press the upward arrow until it starts blinking, and then hold my mat in line with that little gray line. And now we're back in Silhouette Studio. now we're back in Silhouette Studio, and I just cut this piece and I'm ready to cut this piece now. So I'm going to drag this craft piece to the side and then drag my other piece of the box onto the mat. And now we're going to come back up to the send panel. We don't need to change any of our settings or anything because it's exactly the same. And then I'm just going to click send. All right, let's go ahead and make sure that this cut, and it did. So I'm going to go ahead and unload this and just gently pull off my excess. So our next piece, our next biggest piece is our giraffe, which is black. So I'm going to go ahead and use my black cardstock. I'm going to load that onto the mat and then press the upward arrow and wait for it to start blinking, and then line the edge of my mat up with the gray line and arrow. It pulled it in great. So we're going to go ahead and hop back in Silhouette Studio. So here I am back in Silhouette Studio. We just cut this craft colored box. So I'm going to move that to the right hand side. That's kind of a system I like to do when I craft. I have my pieces that I haven't cut yet on the left side. I bring those pieces to the mat when I cut them, and then I move them to the right hand side. It's just kind of a little assembly line almost. So now I'm going to go ahead and put the giraffe in the upper corner, and then I'm going to go back to the send panel, and I don't need to change any of my settings because I'm just using the standard settings for cardstock. So I'm just going to come down to the bottom and click send. Great, it just finished cutting. I'm just going to try and lift up one of the little giraffe's legs. Right there, perfect. So it cut great. So I'm going to unload it by pressing that downward arrow. And this piece is a little bit longer and thinner, so just make sure when you're removing it that you're just really, really gentle so that you don't tear the legs at all. And obviously I'm going to keep all of these pieces to reuse for other projects because I'm just using a small piece. But that being said, this is a great project if you'd like to use some scraps that you already have lying around, because the embellishments on the box can be any size that you want depending on the size of your scraps. So there's our giraffe. I'm just going to put it right here. And then, as I mentioned, sometimes those little inside pieces stick to the mat, so I just went ahead and peeled it off with my fingers and then put it to the side. All right, for the next piece, I'm actually going to show you how to cut 4 different colors of paper at once. So I'm going to use some scissors to create 4 different small pieces of paper on the mat. And I'm going to do this to cut the 2 green leaves and then our orange flowers and our red flowers. And then we'll just have to use a small yellow piece for the middle. All right, so looking at Silhouette Studio, our biggest leaf is the light green leaf, and that is 3.6 inches tall and 2.6 inches wide. So that's the biggest piece that we're going to be cutting here. And I'm just going to go in order. So I'm going to use this light green piece of paper first. And it's actually good that I'm not using this entire piece of paper because there's this little mark on this piece of paper, like a watermark. But the Silhouette mat has a 1-inch grid on it, so it makes it easy for you to know how big of a piece of paper you should cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay my mat on top of my piece of paper, and then, like I said, our light green leaf is 2.6 by 3.6, so I'm going to make this 4 by 3. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to count up 4 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4 at the top, and then go under the mat and just create a little tiny slice. And then I'm going to count 3 squares over and do the same thing. Make sure you're not on top of the mat and cutting your mat. And create a little slice. And it doesn't have to be a perfect square, rectangle, straight line. As long as your piece is a little bit bigger than your actual design that you're cutting, which this will be. So I'm going to go ahead and take this piece and line it up on the corner. And you can see it's a little bit taller on one side, but that's totally fine. Next, we're going to prepare our green leaf. Just going to move this light green to the side. So our green leaf, I'm going to click on it in Silhouette Studio to see the size is 2.6 inches wide and 2.3 inches tall. So I'm going to do this one 3 by 3. So I'm just going to repeat the same process. Just put the mat on top of my green piece of paper, and then at 3 inches make a little mark, and then do the same thing for the height. And as you can see, like, this is not an exact science. This is just the easiest way that I've found to do it in my craft room when I'm using my Silhouette machine. You could measure it out with a ruler. You could make your line straight with a pencil, but we don't necessarily have to do that because it's just the outside of the design anyway. All right, and then we're going to cut our 2 orange flowers together. So I'm going to go ahead and look at those, and that is about, I'm going to make it 3 inches tall and 2 inches wide. And as you can see, the mat is sticky, so beware. And then lastly, for this section, we're going to use the red to make our little red flowers up here in the corner. And they are really small. Even together, it's about 1 inch. So I'm just going to maybe cut a 2-inch square just to give me a little bit of room, but even if you wanted to use a 1-inch square, you probably could fit them both in a 1-inch square. So this is probably looking a little bit intimidating to some of you guys, but I want to point out that if you don't want to do your project like this, you don't have to. You can easily cut your pieces or even use your whole sheet of paper and load it on, load your machine, cut that piece, unload it, and just repeat the process as many times. This just saves you a little bit of time and is an important silhouette skill that you can learn for any project. I really like to do this when I'm doing vinyl projects that are multicolor because then I just have to do it in one sweep and it's just really, really fast to cut out all of my pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and load this into the machine by pressing the upward arrow, waiting for it to blink, and then holding it there for a second. And now let's go back into Silhouette Studio and set our design to cut as it is set up on our physical mat. So back in Silhouette Studio, I can move this giraffe to the right-hand side. And now we need to make sure that we put the correct items in the correct corner of our mat that we're using. So I'm going to go ahead and put my light green leaf in this corner, and when I am using this cutting method, I do like to put it as close to the cutting edge or the cut border as I can, just because that helps me just line it up with the corner of my design. So then I'm going to take my green one and just drag it over here, and you can see this grid as well in Silhouette Studio. And I know that my light green piece of paper was 3 inches by 4 inches, so I can see that it fits inside that square, or sorry, that rectangle. So then to do our flowers, right now these are just singular flowers, but I do want to group them just to make them easier to move. So I'm just going to draw a rectangle over the top of the two, and then I'm going to right click and click group. And these are in the upper left-hand corner. And then I'm going to repeat the same thing for my red flowers, draw a rectangle over the top, right click and select group, and put these in the right-hand corner. And since all of these materials are the same, we don't need to change our cut settings or anything. We're going to go to the send panel, and then all we have to do is click send. All right, our machine just finished cutting, so I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that each of these pieces cut. Just try and lift them up a tiny bit. Sometimes when our pieces are close to the top, we can't lift them up because that roller is there. So since everything else cut, I'm going to just assume that the red piece is cut also. So now I'm just going to press my unload button and then pull off my excess pieces that I'm not using for this project. And then I'm just going to pull off my pieces and place them to the side. For these delicate pieces, it's really important to turn the mat over and peel the mat away from the paper so that it doesn't curl and so that it doesn't rip. So lastly, we just need to cut our very, very tiny little yellow pieces. So I'm just gonna grab my yellow piece of paper, and they are super tiny. I'm gonna look in Silhouette Studio, but I think, yeah, together it's less than 1/2 inch. So I'm just gonna cut a little square out of my paper, and then I'm just gonna load it into the corner, and then press my upward arrow till it starts blinking, and then hold my mat in line with the line and arrow. Back in Silhouette Studio, we can just select these pieces that we cut and move them to the side. And now we can just draw a rectangle over these 2 yellow pieces, right click and group them together, and then move them up to the left-hand corner. And then we're going to go back to the send panel to make our final cut. And we're just going to click send. All right, that cut was super fast because they're so tiny. I can't even check them because this roller bar is here, so I'm just going to go ahead and unload it. And you can see them in the corner, so I'm just gonna peel it back. This one did stick a tiny bit, but I can still just pop it out. And then I'm just gonna peel this one off my mat. And then I'm just gonna take my blue mat cover and place it on top of the mat for storage. And I'm going to store my mat. Now we are to the easiest part of the project, which is the assembly. I think this is also the fun part of the project. So the first thing that we need to do to assemble this box is we're just going to fold on all of the scored lines. And we're not going to close anything up like that. It's just a little bit harder to fold it when we have our giraffe up here and everything. So just go ahead and take your box and go ahead and just fold it on all of the scored lines. I know that they're probably a little bit hard to see in the camera, but you'll obviously be able to see them on your actual box. They're even a little bit hard to see on the box though, I'll be honest, on the cut. Okay, and after we have folded all of the scored marks, we can go ahead and glue our pieces to this section of the box. And I'm using a tape runner. This is honestly my adhesive of choice when I'm doing paper crafting because it's not super messy and it sticks really, really well and it's really easy to use. So I just turn my giraffe over and then I just run the tape runner along the pieces of the giraffe. And obviously his legs are really, really tiny and thin, so it's a little bit thicker, but that's okay. I just like to take my fingers and kind of run it over that excess tape so it doesn't show. And then I'm just going to take my giraffe and line it up kind of with the bottom, not exactly all the way to the bottom. And this actually, I kind of messed up, but I probably shouldn't have put tape on this section because it's going to fold back a little bit. So you don't need to put tape on the top of your giraffe. So next we're going to put our leaves down. So our green leaf was in the back. I'm just going to put a line down the middle of it and then place it right here. And then we had the light green leaf, and this one is very delicate and very thin. So I'm just going to put some tape on the parts that's thick enough, but I'm not even going to put tape down the middle because it's so thin. And then I'm just going to place this on top of that leaf. And then lastly, we need to assemble our little flowers. So I'm going to go ahead and put some tape on the little red flowers, put it inside the orange. And then these little tiny yellow ones, I would probably use a glue stick if I had one right here, but I'm just going to run the tape over the top of it and then just stick it there. They're very tiny. Yeah, a tape runner is probably not ideal for that little tiny piece. And then I'm just going to turn over my assembled flowers, put some glue on the middle, and then place them on my box. Now that we've assembled the front of the box, we just need to assemble this back half of the box so that it will close. So I'm just going to, I forgot to pop out these little pieces, so I'm just going to pop those out right now, the handle and the place where you insert the tabs. And then I'm just going to fold all the scored lines on this one too. Right here you can see that I got a little bit of the craft paper that caught. That's just kind of what happens with craft paper sometimes. So I'm just going to take my scissors and just not even cut, I'm just pulling the scissor blade along the cut line just so that that's not there anymore. And then it happened once right here too. All right, and then I'm just going to fold these pieces along the scored lines. And the reason this box is cut in two different pieces is because it's too big by itself for the Silhouette machine. So if you wanted to cut a smaller box, you could, and you could fit it all in one piece on the Silhouette machine. All right, so now we're ready to put our box pieces together. And this is a little bit tricky, but just be patient and go slow. And if you need to pause and rewatch, you can do that too. So the first step that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work from top to bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and put some tape on this piece right here. And tape it right there to the inside of the box, the base, and you can already see our box is taking shape now. And then I'm going to repeat that on this side and just make sure you're putting it on the right side of the box. So just kind of fold it as you go so that it's creating a 3D effect. And now we can go ahead and put these pieces together. So I'm just going to put some tape on this bottom piece. And it gets tricky once things are 3D, so just do your best to just put a little bit of adhesive on it and then just stick it together. And this is just to reinforce it because the real connection is going to be made on these tabs right here. So I'm going to reinforce it after, but I'm going to go ahead and put my glue on these tabs right now as well. Okay, and then this tab also. And then I'm going to go ahead and stick this tab right here. Now our box has 3 sides, and then we're going to stick our tab here. And now our box has 4 sides and is complete. So as you can see on the bottom now, it's just a little bit loose still. So I'm just going to take my glue and run it along the bottom edge, just a tiny bit, and then press it down. You can even open it up a tiny bit. And then press on the inside. And now we can just go ahead and close up our box. So I'm gonna go ahead and fold this back a little bit because it goes this way, and as well with the top one up here because we just want it to protrude inside. And then I'm just going to insert my tabs into the sides. And this is the final product. So of course you're gonna fill your gift box with all kinds of goodies. You can even cut somebody's name in vinyl or print and cut and put it along the top if you would like. But this is our final project. So thank you guys so much for joining us for this DIY gift box. We're so excited for you to grab your Silhouette machine and create this fun craft.